Tobenna set down his spoon and looked across the dinner table at his grandfather. "Grandfather," he said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to actually answer me this time." The room went still in the way a room goes still when a question has been asked that everyone present has been waiting for and dreading in equal measure. His grandmother, halfway to the sink with a stack of dishes, froze where she stood. "Who is the woman in the photograph my father keeps in his desk drawer?" Tobenna said. "The one from the university. The one who looks like me." His grandfather, Kim Dae-ho, set down his teacup very carefully, as if the sound of it touching the table might break something larger than porcelain. "Tobenna," he said, "that is a conversation for your father." "I have asked my father," Tobenna said. "He does not answer. He takes the photograph and leaves the room. Then perhaps it is not the right time." "Grandfather, I am 16 years old. I have been asking some version of this question since I was 9. Every time I ask, somebody in this family decides it is not the right time. I would like to know when the right time arrives, because I have been waiting a long time for it." Nobody answered that. To understand how a 16-year-old boy arrived at that dinner table asking the one question his entire family had spent a decade avoiding, you have to go back 3 days, to the morning his plane touched down in Seoul. If you are new here, welcome to Afro Soul Tales. We bring you real, raw, deeply emotional stories about love, betrayal, family, and the truths that always find their way home, no matter how long they have been buried. If today is your first time with us, hit subscribe and turn on that notification bell right now, because the story of Tobenna and Adaure is one of the most powerful we have ever told, and you do not want to come into it halfway. If you have already been with us since part 1, welcome back, and thank you for staying with this family through everything it took to get here. Now let's get into it. 3 days earlier, Tobenna had landed at Incheon International Airport with one carry-on bag and a notebook he had filled with questions over 11 months, wearing the face of a 16-year-old who was simply visiting his grandparents for the summer. He was not simply visiting his grandparents for the summer. He had a list, and he had been building it since the night his father went silent at the dinner table in San Francisco and never finished his sentence. He had been building it since the afternoon he found that photograph at the back of a desk drawer, a woman with his exact cheekbones standing in a university courtyard beside a much younger version of his father, both of them laughing at something outside the frame. He had been building it since the Sunday evening he asked his father directly who the woman was, and his father had taken the photograph from his hands without a word and left the room and not come back down for the rest of the night. Silence, Tobenna had learned by then, was not nothing. Silence was data. He had spent 10 years collecting it patiently, methodically, the way a person collects something they are determined not to lose track of. His grandmother had been waiting past the arrivals gate in a pale blue cardigan, her hands folded in front of her, the particular stillness of a woman who has rehearsed how she is going to behave for this visit and is determined to hold the performance together. She smiled when she saw him. The smile did not fully reach her eyes. "Tobenna," she said, "you have grown again. Your father said you would, but I did not believe it would be this much." He hugged her and meant it because whatever else was happening in this family, he loved his grandmother, and the love was not a strategy. The car ride home was full of the kind of conversation that fills space without using it. "How was the flight? Are you hungry? Your cousin started university." Tobenna answered all of it warmly and watched his grandmother's hands on the steering wheel the whole time, the way she gripped it slightly tighter whenever the conversation drifted anywhere near his early childhood. He did not raise the photograph in the car. He had been patient for 10 years already. He could be patient for one more evening. He was not, in the end, patient for one more evening. He waited exactly until dinner on his first night, and the silence that followed his question told him everything his grandfather's careful sentences could not. Tobenna did not raise the subject again for 4 days. He had learned, the way methodical people learn things, that pressure applied constantly wears a person down before it ever breaks them. But pressure applied with patience and precision finds the exact point where a structure gives way. He spent those 4 days being, by every visible measure, a wonderful grandson. He helped his grandfather repair a fence panel in the small garden behind the house. He sat with his grandmother while she prepared kimchi and asked her, with what looked like simple curiosity, about her own mother, her own childhood, the year she met his grandfather. He was building something. He did not call it strategy in his own mind, because that word felt too cold for what he actually wanted, which was simply the truth. But it was, in fact, a strategy, inherited without instruction from a mother he could not remember and had been taught his whole life not to ask about. On the fifth evening, his grandmother found him sitting on the back step of the house, looking out at the garden in the fading light. "You are very quiet tonight," she said. "I am always quiet when I am thinking, Halmoni." She sat down beside him. For a long moment neither of them said anything. "What are you thinking about?" she said. "I am thinking that I do not actually know my own mother's name." His grandmother flinched. It was small, but he saw it because he had spent 10 years learning to watch for exactly this kind of small thing. "Tobenna," she said. "I am not angry at you, Halmoni. I want you to understand that. I am not asking you to betray my father. I am asking you to look at me and tell me whether you think it is right that I am 16 years old and I do not know the name of the woman who gave birth to me." His grandmother's eyes filled. She turned her face toward the garden so he would not see it. He saw it anyway. "Her name was Adaure," she said, very quietly. It was the first time in his entire conscious memory that anyone in his father's family had spoken the name out loud in front of him. He did not move. He did not want to do anything that might cause the moment to close back up the way it had closed every other time he had come near it. "Adaure," he said. "What does it mean?" "I do not know. It is Igbo. She told me once, but it has been so many years." "Tell me about her." She shook her head slowly. "Tobenna, this is not mine to tell. Halmoni, please. I am asking you not as your grandson asking for a story. I am asking you as a person who has spent his whole life feeling like a guest in his own family, trying to understand why." That landed harder than he had entirely intended it to. His grandmother turned and looked at him fully, and what he saw in her face was not resistance anymore. It was grief. Old Carried never sat down. "Is that how you feel?" she said. "That you are a guest?" "Halmoni, I love my father. I love you and grandfather. But I have watched my stepmother for 9 years hold my younger half-sister the way mothers hold children in films, and I have never once been held that way by anyone in that house. I have spent a very long time wondering if it is because something is wrong with me, or because something happened that nobody will tell me about. I would like to know which one it is." His grandmother began to cry. Not loudly. The quiet, contained crying of a woman who has been holding something for a very long time and has just felt the first crack appear in the wall around it. "Nothing is wrong with you, Tobenna," she said. "Nothing has ever been wrong with you. Do you hear me? Nothing. Then tell me what happened." She was quiet for a long time. The garden grew darker around them. Somewhere inside the house a clock ticked through the silence with the patient indifference of a thing that has watched many family secrets nearly surface and get pushed back under. "Your father did something terrible, Tobenna," she said finally. "I have known it for 15 years and I have never said it out loud to anyone. Not even to your grandfather, though I believe he knows it too, in the part of himself he does not let himself look at." Tobenna's heart was beating fast now. His voice, when he spoke, was steady. "What did he do?" His grandmother took his hand. Her hand was small and cool and trembling slightly. "Your mother did not leave you," she said. "She did not abandon you. Whatever your father has allowed you to believe, whatever silence he has let you fill in with your own conclusions, she did not leave." "Then what happened to her?" "Your father took you from her. In the night, while she was asleep. He took you and your passports and he got on a plane and he never told her where he was taking you. He has spent 15 years making sure she could never find you. And he has let you grow up believing that she did not want you. That she left." The words landed on him like something physical. He had built, over 10 years of careful inquiry, every possible theory of what might have happened to his mother. He had imagined illness. He had imagined a woman who simply did not want the complications of a mixed marriage and a half-Nigerian child. He had imagined, in his darkest private moments, that perhaps she had died, and that this was the kindest version, because at least it meant she had not chosen to leave him. He had never imagined this. "He stole me," he said quietly. "Yes. From my own mother. Yes." He sat with that for a long moment, and his grandmother watched him with the particular helpless love of a person who has just handed someone a truth they cannot take back, and is now waiting to see what it does to them. "Does she know where I am?" he said. She shook her head. "I do not believe so. Your father has been very careful. We moved twice in the early years specifically so she could not trace us through any record. I am ashamed to tell you this, Tobenna. I am ashamed that I let it happen and said nothing, all these years, because I told myself it was not my place. That a mother does not interfere between a husband and a wife. That your father must have had his reasons. I told myself many things to make the silence easier to live inside. I do not believe any of them anymore. I want to find her." She nodded slowly. "I know. Will you help me?" For a long moment she did not answer. He could see the calculation happening behind her eyes, the loyalty to her son fighting against the plain, undeniable wrongness of what her son had done, fighting against the face of the grandson sitting in front of her, who had her own son's eyes and a stranger's cheekbones and 16 years of unanswered questions written into every careful, patient thing he had ever done in this house. "I do not have an address for her," she said. "I do not have a phone number. Your father made certain that nothing like that survived in this house." Tobenna's face fell. "But I remember her name in full," she continued. "And I remember she was studying something extraordinary at the university, something they put her name into the official record for, the year before you were born. Your father used to be so proud of it he could not stop talking about it. If she continued that work, and a woman like her, Tobenna, I do not believe she would have stopped, then her name will be somewhere. Published. Spoken of. The kind of woman she was does not simply disappear from the record of her own field." Tobenna looked at his grandmother for a long moment. "Adaure Obi," he said. She nodded. "Yes, that was her name before she married your father. Adaure Obi. If the story has your full attention right now, this is the moment to drop a like on this video. It genuinely helps more people find this story, and what happens in the next few minutes is exactly the part you came here for. Keep watching." Tobenna did not sleep that night. He sat at the small desk in his grandparents' guest room with his laptop open and his grandmother's words running through his mind in a loop, and he did the only thing his particular mind knew how to do with a piece of information that large. He turned it into a search. He typed the name into the university's own digital archive first, the one his grandmother had mentioned, the one that held its history of academic distinctions. It took him 11 minutes to find it, a record from 18 years earlier, the highest distinction in the Department of International Development in over a decade, a name, Adaure Obi, attached to a thesis title he did not fully understand and a citation count that, even to his untrained eye, looked extraordinary. From there, it took him 40 minutes more to find her listed as a contributing researcher on a paper published 9 years earlier, her affiliation a university in southeastern Nigeria. From there, he found a faculty page, slightly outdated, with a small photograph that made his breath catch in his chest. The woman in the photograph had his exact cheekbones and a steadiness in her eyes that he recognized instantly. He saw a version of it every time he looked in a mirror. Dr. Adaure Obi, senior researcher and lecturer. Specialization in international development policy with a focus on diaspora communities and child welfare. He read the words diaspora communities and child welfare 3 times. Of course, he thought. Of course, that is what she has spent her life studying. He did not know yet exactly what that meant, but something in him understood, with the instinctive accuracy of a child recognizing his own blood, that his mother had spent the years she lost him building her whole professional life around exactly the kind of harm that had been done to her. The faculty page had a contact email at the bottom. Tobenna stared at it for a long time. He had built a case for 10 years. He had collected silences and turned them into evidence. He had been patient in a way that very few 16-year-olds are patient, because the alternative to patience in his house had always been a closed door. But now, sitting in front of an actual address that might actually reach an actual woman who might actually be his mother, the patience that had carried him this far very nearly failed him completely. His hands were shaking when he opened a blank message. He did not know how to begin. He deleted 4 attempts. On the 5th, he stopped trying to write something careful and simply wrote what was true. "My name is Tobenna. I am 16 years old. I was born in Seoul in December, and I believe you may be my mother. I am sorry if this message is wrong, and I am sorry if it causes you pain, but I have been looking for the truth for a very long time, and tonight my grandmother finally told it to me. If I am wrong, I apologize completely and you may delete this message and never hear from me again. If I am right, I would like very much to know you. He read it 11 times. He did not change a single word. He pressed send at 2:43 in the morning, Seoul time, and then he sat very still in the dark and waited, the way he imagined his mother, if this was truly his mother, had once sat very still in an empty bedroom and waited for a phone to ring. She replied in 9 minutes. It would be a long time before either of them learned that she had not been asleep either, that on that particular night, for reasons she could never fully explain except to say that some part of a mother's body keeps its own private calendar of loss. She had been sitting awake at her desk in Anambra at exactly the hour her son was writing to her, looking at the photograph of him as an 8-month-old that she had carried with her, unbroken in its frame, through every single one of the 15 years in between. Her reply read, Tobenna, I am Adaure Obi. I am your mother. I have looked for you every single day since the morning I woke up and you were gone. I do not know what they have told you, or what you have been led to believe, but I need you to know one thing before anything else passes between us. I never stopped looking. I never stopped praying. I never, for one single day, stopped being your mother in every way a heart is capable of being a mother to a child she cannot hold. Please, tell me you are safe. Tell me you are well. Tell me everything. I am here. I have always been here. Tobenna read the message and then read it again, and then put both hands over his face and wept in a way he had not allowed himself to weep since he was small enough that nobody had yet taught him to be careful with his own feelings in that house. They spoke that night for 3 hours, first by message and then, when neither of them could bear the slowness of typing any longer, by video call. Tobenna saw his mother's face move and speak for the first time in 15 years. Adaure saw her son's face for the first time since he was an infant in her arms. Now a tall, careful, watchful young man with her own mother's steadiness in his jaw and his father's stillness in the way he listened before he spoke. You have my mother's chin, she said. I have been told I look like my father. You do around the eyes, but the chin is all mine. My mother used to say that chin meant a person who finishes what they start. I think that might be true about me. She laughed, and then she cried, and then she laughed again at herself for crying, and Tobenna sat in his grandmother's guest room in Seoul and watched his mother's face cycle through more honest emotion in 3 minutes than he had watched his entire father's household produce in 3 years. He understood, with the same clean clarity with which he understood everything important, that he had found something that had been missing from his whole life without him ever having a name for the shape of the hole it left. They talked about everything. The 8 months she had with him as a baby. The morning she woke and reached for him and found nothing. The phone call 6 days later when his father told her to go home. The 3 months of police reports and embassy visits and a lawyer's gentle, devastating explanation that the legal road ahead would be measured in years. Anambra, her parents, the community that had judged her and embraced her in equal measure. Her research, her publications, the work she had built out of the wreckage of what had been done to her. He told her about San Francisco, about a stepmother who was not unkind but was never warm in the specific way reserved for her own daughter, about a father who flinched whenever Tobenna asked questions that came anywhere near his early childhood, about the photograph in the desk drawer, the dinner table silence, 10 years of collecting evidence with no name yet for what he was building toward. She listened to all of it with her hand pressed against her mouth. When he finished, she said, Tobenna, I am so sorry. I am so sorry you grew up in a house where you had to build a case just to learn the truth of your own beginning. No child should have to do that. I am not sorry I did it, he said. It is how I found you. She said nothing for a moment, because she could not speak. I would like to meet you, she said finally, properly, in person, if you want that. I have wanted that since I was 5 years old and did not know how to want it yet. They arranged it for 6 weeks later, the earliest his summer break and her teaching schedule could align, and she flew to Seoul rather than asking him to come to her. I came for you once before, she said, and I will come for you again. This time nobody is going to stop me reaching the gate. If you have been with this story since part 1, you already know what it took for Adaure to get here. You already know about the empty bedroom, the dead phone battery, the 3 months of fighting before the lawyer told her the truth about how long this might take. Comment below right now and tell me, Were you holding your breath through that video call the way I was writing it? And subscribe if you have not already, because the reunion itself is coming next, and you do not want to read about it secondhand in the comments before you have seen it for yourself. Adaure landed at Incheon International Airport on a Thursday morning. The same airport, almost the same season, that had once delivered her into the happiest years of her life and then, much later, had watched her leave with 3 months of grief packed into 2 suitcases. Tobenna was waiting at the arrival's gate with his grandmother beside him, because his grandmother, once she had finally told the truth, had refused to let him face this moment alone, and had refused even more firmly to let it happen anywhere her son could interfere with it. Adaure came through the gate and stopped exactly the way she had stopped at this same airport 18 years earlier, as a 24-year-old with a scholarship letter and a Bible from her mother. This time, what stopped her was not the cold air or the strangeness of a new country. It was the sight of a tall 16-year-old boy standing very still, watching her with an expression that was trying and failing to hold itself together. Neither of them said anything for a moment. Then Tobenna crossed the distance between them in 4 long steps and put his arms around his mother, and Adaure made a sound that had been building in her chest for 15 years. The two of them stood in the middle of the arrivals hall holding on to each other while strangers moved around them, and his grandmother stood a few feet away with both hands pressed over her mouth, weeping at what she had finally made possible. "You are so tall," Adaure said into his shoulder. "You are so tall, Tobenna. I held you when you were this small. Look at you now. I am sorry it took so long." She pulled back and held his face in both her hands. The exact gesture she had imagined years earlier using on his father, the gesture she had never gotten the chance to use because he had never asked her the question that would have required it. "None of this delay was yours," she said. "Do you hear me? None of it. You did nothing wrong. Not for one single day of your whole life, and you spent 10 years finding your way back to me when you had every reason in the world to give up. You are the bravest person I have ever known. I get that from you, I think." She laughed. The same real laugh from a university courtyard half a lifetime ago. "Perhaps. But I think you also worked very hard for it yourself." His grandmother stepped forward then, uncertain, her hands twisting together in front of her. "Adaure," she said, "I do not know if you can forgive me. 15 years of silence is a long time to ask forgiveness for." Adaure looked at her for a long moment. Then she reached out and took the older woman's hand. "You told him the truth in the end," she said. "That matters more than the 15 years it took to get there. Thank you." They spent the next 10 days together in Seoul, mother and son, building in days what most families build over years, walking through the city, eating in small restaurants, Adaure pointing out the university where she had once sat at desk 17 and a man had told her there was a more efficient approach to her regression model, Tobenna listening to every word of it with the focused, hungry attention of a person filling in the missing chapters of his own story. But the joy of those 10 days did not arrive without a cost to someone else in the house. That someone was Jae-won. Kim Jae-won learned what had happened from his own mother. In a phone call she made the same evening Tobenna's first message reached Adaure, because she had decided, after 15 years of silence, that she was no longer willing to be the last person in the family to act with honesty. "Jae-won," she said, "your son knows. He found his mother. He is with her now, and I am the one who helped him." The silence on the line, his mother would say later, lasted so long she thought the call had dropped. "What have you done?" he said finally. "I told the truth," she said. "Something somebody in this family should have done 15 years ago. I am not sorry, Jae-won. I love you. I have loved you every day of your life. But I cannot love what you did to that woman, and I cannot love what your silence has done to that boy, and I will not carry it for you any longer." Jae-won flew to Seoul 2 days later, not to confront Adaure, his mother believed, but because he could not bear to remain 3,000 miles from a reckoning that had finally, after 15 years, arrived at his door whether he was ready for it or not. He came to his parents' house on the 8th day of Adaure and Tobenna's reunion. Tobenna was out with his mother. Only his parents were home, and they let him in with the careful, sorrowful faces of people who had spent 15 years protecting a decision they had never agreed with. "Where is he?" Jae-won said. "With his mother," his mother said. "Where he should have been able to be his entire life." Jae-won sat down heavily at the kitchen table and put his head in his hands. "I do not know how to face her," he said. Then perhaps that is the place to begin, his mother said. Not with an excuse. Not with an explanation of why you did it. Simply with an honest reckoning of the fact that you do not know how to face the consequence of what you chose. Adaure and Tobenna returned that evening to find Jaewon sitting on the back step of the house in the fading light, in nearly the exact spot where his mother had finally told the truth 12 days earlier. He stood when he saw them. He did not move toward his son. For a long moment he looked like a man who understood he had forfeited the right to move first. Tobenna, he said. Tobenna looked at his father for a long moment. There was no performed anger in his face. There was something quieter and, in its own way, harder to bear. The calm, level assessment of a young man who had spent 10 years building a case and had finally reached its conclusion. I am not ready to talk to you yet, he said. But I am not running from you either. I needed you to know that. Jaewon nodded, his eyes wet. That is more than I deserve. Then he turned to Adaure. For a long moment neither of them spoke. 15 years stood between them in that small garden, and both of them felt the full weight of every one of those years arrive at once. Adaure, he said, his voice breaking on the words. I do not have a defense. I was afraid. I convinced myself you were going to leave and take him with you, and instead of asking you, instead of trusting you, I became the very thing I was afraid of losing you to. I took him from you. I let him grow up believing things about you that were never true. There is no version of an apology large enough to hold what I did. Adaure looked at him for a long time. She thought of the empty bedroom, the dead phone battery, the lawyer's gentle, devastating explanation, the 15 years of morning prayers said over a single photograph. She thought of every single thing she might have said to him, every accusation she had earned the right to make, every door she could now, with complete justification, slam permanently shut in his face. I am not going to pretend that what you did not nearly destroy me, she said. It took 15 years from me that I will never get back. Took 15 years from him. There is real damage here, Jaewon, and I will not soften it for your comfort. He nodded, unable to look at her. But I did not spend 15 years praying for my son back so that I could spend the rest of my life carrying hatred for his father, she said. I forgive you, not because what you did was small, because I refuse to let it be the thing that defines the rest of my life, or the rest of his. Jaewon wept then, openly, the way Tobenna had once watched him weep at a graduation ceremony 15 years earlier, before everything broke. What do you want from me now? He said. I do not want to disturb your marriage, Adaure said. I do not want your wife to fear me, or your daughter to grow up believing her father's first family is a threat to her own. I am not here to take anything from your house, Jaewon. I am here for my son. That is the entirety of what I came for, and it is the entirety of what I am asking for now. You will go on with your life and your wife and the family you have built since. I am simply asking that Tobenna be allowed, fully and without obstruction, to have his mother back. You are more gracious than I have any right to receive, Jaewon said. I am not doing this for your sake, Adaure said. She looked at Tobenna, who was standing very still beside her, watching his parents speak honestly to each other for the first time in his entire life. I am doing it for his, she said. If you are still here, you already know this story is not finished, because forgiveness is never the end of a story. It is only the place where a harder, quieter kind of work begins. Like this video right now if it has you holding your breath. Because what happens when Tobenna carries this truth back home to San Francisco is exactly the kind of reckoning that does not stay contained to one family member. Tobenna flew back 11 days later carrying his mother's phone number saved under a name he had waited his whole life to type into a contact list, and a promise from her, repeated 3 times before he boarded, that this time the silence between them would never again be allowed to last more than a single day. San Francisco received him exactly as it always had, indifferent to how much had changed inside him. His key had barely turned in the lock before he felt it, the particular silence that, in that house, had never once meant peace. The television was off. His stepmother's shoes were by the door, but his little half-sisters were missing, which meant somebody had decided this was not a conversation for a 7-year-old to be present for. Hannah was sitting at the kitchen table with her hands wrapped around a cup of tea that had gone cold a long time ago. Her eyes were red. You are back, she said. I am back. Sit down, Tobenna. We need to talk. He sat. J1 had flown home 2 days ahead of him, and whatever had happened in this house in his absence had clearly happened without him, and was about to land on him anyway. Your father called me from Seoul, Hannah said. He told me everything. What he did 15 years ago. What he let you believe. What he let me believe too, since the day I met him, because he told me your mother chose to leave, that she walked away from you both, and I built 9 years of my life on top of that lie without ever once questioning it. Her voice cracked. Do you know what that does to a person, Tobenna? To learn the story you raised a child inside of was never true. I am sorry you found out that way. Do not apologize to me. You are the one who lost something. I am only now understanding how much. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, then looked at him directly. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest, because I have spent 2 days imagining the worst answer and I cannot live inside my own imagination any longer. Are you going to leave us? Are you going to forget this house? Forget your sister? Forget that whatever your father did, the rest of us tried, in our own broken way, to love you? Tobenna sat with the question for a moment before he answered, because he understood it mattered. Hannah, I am not going to forget Sora, he said. I love my sister. None of this is her fault. And I am not going to pretend you were cruel to me, because you were not. You were just never quite warm, and for years I thought that meant something was wrong with me. Now I think it meant you were carrying a story that never added up, even if you could not say why. She looked startled, like she had not expected him to see that clearly into something she had not fully admitted to herself. But I want my mother completely in my life now, he said. Not a secret, not something I do quietly so it does not upset anyone. I am not living in silence again. Not for you, not for my father, not for anyone. She was quiet a moment. That is fair, she said. J1 appeared in the doorway, having clearly been listening close enough to hear most of it. He looked older than he had 11 days earlier, the particular aging that happens to a face in the days after it finally stops running from something. He sat across from his son. I do not know where to begin, he said. Begin with why, Tobenna said. Your mother's family kept calling, asking her to come home permanently. With you? J1 said. Instead of trusting her, instead of simply asking her what she wanted, I let fear build a story in my head where she was already gone, and I convinced myself I would rather act first than be left standing in an empty apartment. I told myself I was protecting you. I was protecting myself from a fear I never had the courage to say out loud to the one person who could have answered it in 5 seconds, if I had only asked. Tobenna's jaw tightened. You destroyed her life and mine, because you were afraid to ask one question. Yes, J1 said. I am not going to defend it. I am not ready to forgive you. I am not asking you to be ready, J1 said. I am only asking you not to disappear from my life the way I made her disappear from yours. If you have something to say to me, say it. I will not flinch again. I have flinched from enough. Tobenna looked at his father for a long moment. Then I will say this. I want my mother regularly in my actual life, not squeezed into the edges of it. And I need you to support that instead of making it difficult, the way you made everything about her difficult for 10 years. Whatever you need, J1 said. I mean that completely. That night, Tobenna called his mother and told her all of it. The kitchen table, Hannah's tears, his father's confession. When he finished, Adaure said, Tobenna, I want you to hear something clearly. I am not asking you to choose me over them. I lost 10 years I can never get back, and I am not interested in fighting for territory in your heart. I only want a fair place in it. You already have more than a fair place, he said. 2 weeks later, his grandmother called him to her house before his flight to San Francisco was due to leave, and led him to a small wooden box she had kept hidden on the top shelf of her closet for 15 years. Inside were photographs she could never bring herself to destroy. His parents young and laughing, his mother pregnant in a small soul kitchen, himself as a newborn in his mother's arms. I kept telling myself I was keeping these in case you ever asked, she said. I think the truth is some part of me always knew that one day the truth would come looking. The way it always does, no matter how carefully a family tries to bury it. He held the box. Thank you, Halmoni, he said, For all of it. At the gate the next morning, his father took his face in both hands, an unfamiliar gesture for a man who had never been openly demonstrative. "Tell her something for me, if you find the moment," Jae-won said. "Tell her the man who took you from her is not the man you will grow into. Tell her thank you for raising the kind of son who refused to let a lie stand, even from 3,000 miles away, with no chance to teach him anything directly." "I will tell her," Tobenna said. The years that followed were not without their ordinary difficulties, the way any family's years are not without difficulty. But nothing in that house stayed buried anymore. Tobenna spent his school breaks in Anambra, learning his mother's language one careful phrase at a time, standing in the same university courtyard where his parents had once fallen in love and, years later, where his father had finally asked for forgiveness. Sora grew up knowing the truth of her brother's story from the beginning instead of inheriting a silence the way he had. Hannah softened, slowly, into the kind of warmth she had never quite managed before, now that she no longer had a lie standing guard over her own heart. Jae-won spent the rest of his life trying to earn back, year by patient year, what fear had once cost him in a single night. And Adaure never remarried. She did not need to. She had built a full and honored life out of the wreckage of what was taken from her. And when her son finally walked back into it, she simply made room, the way she always would have, if she had ever been given the chance. Tobenna grew into exactly the kind of man his grandmother's small wooden box had always quietly insisted he was capable of becoming. A young man who had spent 10 years refusing to let a lie stand, and who carried that same refusal into everything he built afterward, because he had learned, earlier than most people ever learn it, that the truth does not stay buried forever. It waits. And eventually it always comes looking. If the story moved you, that is exactly why we tell stories like this one. Drop a like on this video right now. It takes 1 second, and it tells this channel that stories about truth, family, and the slow, hard work of forgiveness are worth telling more of. Subscribe and turn on your notification bell so you never miss the next one we bring you. And in the comments below, tell me 2 things. First, where are you watching from today? Second, do you think Adaure was right to forgive Jae-won and let him keep his new family in peace? Or do you think she gave him more grace than he earned? I read every single comment, every one without exception. God bless you. Thank you for staying with this story from beginning to end.